This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center. The CNN Center right now is just beginning to work on this story. Obviously,
19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world, using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
You can see some cars that have been moved here. And you can see the amount of soot and dirt on that car from the scene. This really hasn't been moved since it happened, but even more jarring, I think, is this scene right here. Look at these 2 cars placed on top of one another. I think when you think about the impact that these planes must have had, it's hard to visualize it because everything melted. But here, at least you have some remnants. You have literally an engine that is melded together with other parts of the car. Moving over, you've got another car they moved here. It looks like it's been through a war. You can see the papers, all the burned out papers from the building. You see the soot and the dirt, and it just shows you how devastating this blast was. Look across the street there. You've got a Con Ed truck that, you know, some of the Con Ed people now looking at, examining, trying to figure out which...
Before I tell you what we found, I'd like to tell you what we did not find. We did not find any evidence that explosives were used in the collapse of Building 7. We ran down detailed computer simulations of blast scenarios. What you see in this slide are the expected air pressures from the smallest possible blast capable of crippling a critical column. This size blast would have produced an incredibly loud sound that was not recorded on videos of the collapse nor reported by witnesses.
What happened? There was an explosion. We was in the lobby and the 3rd explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us.
What was it like? What was it like?
Horrible.
It's
horrible.
Like
the whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was planted probably?
Yeah, definitely a secondary explosion. Because we was inside waiting to go upstairs, and on the way upstairs, the whole fucking plane blew. And we just collapsed on everybody inside the lobby.
Similar to the first tower coming down, secondary?
I don't know about the first one, but I know the second one was terrible. Then there was a 3rd one too after that one. That's right. Everybody was inside the building, waiting to go upstairs, and they just let loose. Everything just let loose inside the building.
So what you told me is that there was a plane or whatever hit the building, and then the secondary explosion.
It was like 3 explosions after that. We came in after the fire. We came when the fire was going on already. We was in the staging area inside the building, waiting to go upstairs. Then they exploded. Then the whole lobby collapsed on the lobby inside.
They're very strong buildings, as you remember from the blast the last time. So,
But what does it take as an engineer to do the Oh no!
As this man is standing here saying they're very strong buildings and that he expected them to continue to stand, we in the background see the buildings collapse, which again feeds that feeling that there was something else, that there may have been something else that brought those buildings down.
There was a lot of talk there in New York of another explosion prior to the collapse of the first building.
Oh my God!
Oh my God!
a bomb that did that.
Oh, God, look at that!
That was a fucking bomb that did that. There's no goddamn way that could have happened.
And that did look like there was an explosion as it went down.
It went up.
Everybody was being ushered through the complex, away from Liberty. All of a sudden, it was like bang, 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 like bullet shots. And then all of a sudden, 3 tremendous explosions. And everything started coming down.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI.
As we were moving towards the building, we saw the top begin to blow out in a plume of smoke, and we heard the noise associated with an implosion.
It's like holy hell coming down them stairs. And then when we finally got to the bottom, they were coming out on the mezzanine level there, and another explosion came right from it, because everyone flying.
Something ignited there, though. Maybe they had that was an incredible.
That was an incredible explosion.
And that does not cause from a.
I agree with you. I think it was the third plane, but again,
no, it could have been something. It could have been something that was planted.
Or a bomb planted in the building. Yeah.
You want to call your mother or something?
You heard explosions, like boom.
We just heard one more explosion. That's about the 4th one.
The thing that most struck me about the 9/11 incident was following the incident how overflights had detected with infrared camera 1400 degree Fahrenheit hotspots on the surface of ground zero, and that being there for a week indicates that there was something very hot going on below the surface.
Naysayers tend to say, well, that's just air being blown out the windows because you have like an accordion effect. It's can be compressed. Well, it's going on at a lot of different levels.
The heat from the fire supposedly softened the steel and thereby brought the buildings down. If you have a flame at 750 degrees, you can hold that flame under a steel beam forever, and you'll never reach a high enough temperature to bend steel.
There were so many columns in the building that were not affected by either the fires or the impact damage, and they all came down, just did once. So it's a little disheartening, and it's implausible.
That is valuable information for those of us who have the responsibility to protect the American people. He told us the operatives had been instructed to ensure that the explosives went off at a point that was high enough to prevent people trapped above from escaping. The reason I keep insisting that there was a relationship between Iraq and Saddam and Al-Qaeda, because there was a relationship between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. This administration never said that the 9/11 attacks were orchestrated between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. We did say there were numerous contacts between Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda.
He said there were 3 main reasons for going to war in Iraq: weapons of mass destruction, the claim that Iraq was sponsoring terrorists who had attacked us on 9/11, and that Iraq had purchased nuclear materials from Niger. All 3 of those turned out to be false.
First, just if I might correct a misperception, I don't think we ever said, at least I know I didn't say, that there was a direct connection between September the 11th and Saddam Hussein. We did say that he was the state sponsor of terror. I was very careful never to say that Saddam Hussein ordered the attacks on America. Saddam Hussein aids and protects terrorists, including members of Al-Qaeda. Secretly and without fingerprints, he could provide one of his hidden weapons to terrorists or help them develop their own. Before September the 11th, many in the world believed that Saddam Hussein could be contained.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that these people would take an airplane and slam it into the World Trade Center, take another one and slam it into the Pentagon, that they would try to use an airplane as a missile.
There was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government, that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
We know it's a war game scenario, that it has to do with airline counterterrorism. Why is that important enough to kill for?
Because it's no longer a game.
If some terrorist group wants to act out this scenario, why target you for assassination?
Depends on who your terrorists are.
The men who conceived of it in the first place. You're saying our government plans to commit a terrorist act against a domestic airline?
There you go. Indicting the entire government as usual. It's a faction. A small faction.
For what possible gain?
The Cold War's over, John. But with no clear enemy to stockpile against, the arms market's flat. But bring down a fully loaded 727 into the middle of New York City, and you'll find a dozen tin-pot dictators all over the world just clamoring to take responsibility and begging to be smart-bombed.
I can't believe it.
The debris here is spread over a 3 to 4 mile radius, which has now been completely sealed off and is being treated, according to the FBI, as a crime scene. Governor Tom Ridge made some remarks earlier at a press conference. He had flown over the site. He said the emergency response here was immediate. He also said, and I don't know whether or not you all are able to see pictures of this, but this is one of those cases where the pictures really do tell the story, that sort of the most horrifying aspect of this particular crash scene is how little debris is visible. There is a large crater in the ground, and I'm hoping that you all are seeing it as I'm talking about it, but that's really all you see is a large crater in the ground and just tiny, tiny bits of debris. There's been at least one report that the investigators out there, and there are hundreds of them, as I said tonight, have found nothing larger than a phone book.
It's a United Airlines plane, it's believed to be at that site outside Pittsburgh, isn't it?
That's exactly right, John, with 45 people total on board. And one of the more profound things today, the imprint of terrorism seared not only on Wall Street, but also on Main Street. Here you have an area 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, and this plane, which went down at about 10 o'clock this morning. We have rescue vehicles that came in earlier in the day, and they have turned up nothing. No one believed to be alive from this crash. Some of the media just getting back to the scene, which is about a quarter of a mile up on a hill back behind me, and so some of the first pictures just starting to come in within the last hour. I want to get quickly to Chris Kanicki. He's a photographer with the Pittsburgh affiliate of Fox affiliate. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Smoke, fire?
Nothing. It was absolutely quiet. It was actually very quiet. Nothing going on down there, no smoke, no fire. Just a couple of people walking around. They look like part of the NTSB crew walking around looking at the pieces.
How big would you say that hole was?
From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
What could you see on the ground, if anything, other than dirt and ash? And
you couldn't see anything. You could just see dirt, ash, and people walking around, broken trees.
Some small fires in the woods, just small brush fires. You know, the ground smoking, debris everywhere, pieces of metal, paper, insulation, wiring. And I just looked around and no people, you know, and I'm thinking, where are the people?
In a sense, if we imagine the kind of world we would face if the people who bombed the West Hall in Mosul, or the people who did the bombing in Spain, or the people who attacked the United States in New York, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania and attacked the Pentagon.
You and the president had earlier discussed rules of engagement for taking down a hijacked airplane, but you were the one who gave the direct order to shoot down a plane that you were told, as it turns out incorrectly, was headed for Washington.
Right. That's correct.
What's that moment like?
Well, it was necessary, and it was frankly, I didn't pause to think about it very much, because once one of those aircraft was hijacked, it was a weapon. We'd seen already, by that time, 3 of them go in to the Pentagon and the World Trade Center in New York. As a result, thousands died, and if we had been in a position to intercept one of those to keep it from striking its target, would we have done it? Absolutely. And what I did was pass on the President's approval of the basic proposition that we would, in fact, authorize our people to shoot down aircraft that had been hijacked and refused to divert. So I saw it as part of my responsibility, but I did it quickly because we had a lot of other things we were doing at the same time.
Well, those people aboard Flight 93 who resisted the hijackers are now being remembered as heroes in the history of the United States for preventing a calamity from being an even worse one.
How much of the plane actually impacted the building?
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual site of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all of the floors collapsed.
At a hotel in Arlington, Virginia. It shows the explosion that followed the crash of American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon, but the video does not show the airplane. The video's existence was disclosed in 2002. A hotel manager says it was confiscated by the FBI. It was just publicly released as the result of a lawsuit.
At any point during this day, were you just, in a very base way, afraid?
There were many times, Miles, that you were afraid, you were worried, especially when I was standing in front of the Pentagon that night, seeing one of our fortresses pried open by a missile airplane.
We affirm that some crimes are so terrible they offend humanity itself, and we resolved that the aggressions and ambitions of the wicked must be opposed early, decisively, and collectively before they threaten us all. We face enemies that hate not our policies, but our existence, the tolerance of openness and creative culture that defines us. But the outcome of this conflict is certain. We must speak the truth about terror. Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th, malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
I know you said there'll be a time for politics, but you've also said you wanted to change the tone of Washington. Howard Dean recently seemed to muse aloud whether you had advanced knowledge of 9/11. Do you agree or disagree with the RNC that this kind of rhetoric borders on political hate speech?
Yeah. Look, there's time for politics. And, you know, it's time for politics. And it's an absurd insinuation.
In that case, sir, can I follow up on something unrelated?
And you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to wonder exactly what President George W. Bush knew about the attack, and when he knew it. According to the official White House version, it was at this moment in a Florida classroom that Bush learned the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that the U.S. was under attack. But here's what George Bush himself said almost 3 months later when asked about September 11th.
I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there and didn't have much time to think about it.
Now, wait a minute. George Bush was told about the second plane while he was inside the classroom. So you just heard him describe seeing the first plane crash on television that day. But that's impossible. No one saw the first plane crash on TV on September the 11th because the videotape of it didn't surface until the next day. So how could George Bush have seen what he said he saw?
And we got in a vehicle, and the kid driving the thing felt like 100 miles an hour. I mean, we're bouncing along and charging along. Finally I told the guy, I said, slow down. I mean, you
Al-Qaeda's not here. The decision was made to go to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. My question was who did it. The head of the CIA, George Tenet, believed it was Al-Qaeda. It had the earmarks of an Al-Qaeda attack. But Tenet wasn't that definitive yet. So my first indication it could be Al-Qaeda was during the national security meeting at Offutt Air Force Base.
Make sure they arrest the whistleblowers. We got to arrest more whistleblowers. Protect the government. Remember this. Your government funded and trained Al-Qaeda. Repeat it again.